buttoned that up.
I'm very relaxed, as you can tell. I've been stretching. Brett Turley, mate, welcome to the ISS podcast. Thanks for coming on. Mate, you've had an interesting career, starting with in special operations, and then your almost philanthropic life, and then moving into the fitness and wellness industry. Mate, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me, boys. I wouldn't say it's philanthropic, but it's been interesting as well, though. That's for sure. I've meandered around the place.
And your meandering kind of started. Let's take it back so we can get a bit of a backstory. Special operations. You're a combat engineer in SOA.
Yeah, correct.
And you did a couple of deployments. You had a pretty good job. You were for the listeners that aren't Dargans or Army centric. Can you take them through your service and some of your deployments, mate?
Yeah, so I was an explosive detection dog handler. Started off in Darwin, though. They're up at 1CR in, I think, joined 2004. Fuck, that makes me sound old. Started there, but then finished up the last few years working out of SOA down here in Sydney. So working with the boys from 2 Commando and all that sort of jazz. So through the process, though, ended up doing 2 tours of Afghanistan. One was MRTF 1 in 2008, 2009. And then SOTG 17 in 2012. So that's the military career summed up pretty succinctly. Basically just got to cruise around the world with a dog and look for things that go bang.
Mate, what is it like when you find something that goes bang? What is it? So I guess when you look at people in these particular jobs and they go, you sort of get the training and then you get out on the ground and you're like, oh, that's a real bomb. What is going through your fucking mind, mate?
Well, I've found IEDs a couple of ways. Some are not advisable, i.e. driving over the bloody things. And then I've found them with the dog as well. So, and I've also missed one. I've missed one in, 2, including the one I drove over, but, in a Bushmaster, but, if we're talking in terms of searching a dog, when you're downrange and your dog parks its ass, so when it indicates on the explosive, you kind of have this, oh shit moment, and everything just stops for a bit. And then hopefully if your dog hasn't sat on anything, you just recall it, come back. But you know what the training system's like in the military. It's pretty top notch. It gets you as ready as you can possibly be for those types of things, because it's like, I always explain, it's like playing a game of footy, training for a game of footy every day, but never getting to play. So when you get to actually get a run on Guernsey, you're pretty well prepared, but you're never quite prepared for that first IED. And particularly when they go bang underneath you, you're never prepared for that kind of shit.
How big was the one that you missed in the bushy?
The one we hit in the bushy was 30 kilos of homemade explosive right underneath the vehicle. And it was functioned by one of the little anti-personnel mines that they had everywhere, the little Russian PMNs. And that thing went up with a great amount of dust and force. The front end of the bushy was like in the air for, felt like about 60 seconds, but it was probably only a few. But dust everywhere, dog hit the roof of the Bushmaster. I was holding onto the Jesus bars just trying to bloody work out what was going on. It was an experience, that's for sure.
Was that just you boys out the front of the convoy, like standard, put the engineers out front and they can get blown up? Yeah, find them, sorry. And then, did you have all the rhino? Because I remember later on in the trips, they put a whole bunch of sweets on the front of the bushies to help you out finding them. But
no, we had none of that. That was 2008 or 2009 was the IED that I was in. We didn't have any of that stuff, but we were up building one of the patrol bases just out back from Chora, so just down from Chora, and it was a pretty unfriendly part of the world at that stage because we hadn't done a lot of ops up there. And we were setting up that patrol base, so it sort of dragged dragged Terry out to sort of have a bit of a dig at us. And there've been a couple of strikes along the route. We've been going from one of the patrol bases to get stores and bring it back to build it. So we were doing search operations all that morning. And it was weird because I wore my seatbelt for the first time ever, but that day, which is strange. But we were doing searching, and then it's kind of like that sixth sense moment where where I looked out. I was the first seat behind the driver, and I looked out the window, and just the ground didn't look like we were about to go into a bit of a defile. And I just went, "Ooh, that doesn't look good." And I lifted my legs up off the floor, and then we just went boom up. So none of the boys were searching. We didn't miss it, technically. We hit it. We cleared the route, I guess, if you want to sort of call it a partial success. But, yeah, it was definitely an interesting event that probably shaped a lot of the way we conducted business from there on after. I think we were a little bit complacent or probably under a rush to get places, and it kicked us up the arse, that's for sure.
Because, I mean, these are fairly rudimentary devices, right? Like, was there stuff that you found and were like, this is a little complex, or like we're talking like big daisy chained, you're in the middle of an absolute shit fight?
Well, the first trip in 2008, 2009, we had a pretty quiet trip. Like, I think we got brassed up in my team. Like, we got blown up, obviously. I found a couple of IEDs. The boys found a couple. I missed one where one of the boys was blown up in the back of a bushy, one of the infantry fellas. But that's an interest. We can touch on that if you want. But they were rudimentary, but they were so clever with the way they did it, right? Like, you're looking essentially, if you're talking about the mine detectors for the engineers that had, you're looking for like a pinprick of metal across, like, you might be searching for 5-10 Ks when we're doing a lot of route searching and stuff as well. So you're looking for like the old proverbial needle in a haystack. So as rudimentary as they were, they were really efficient and they worked really well. And obviously the dog had to have a scent to find. If there was no scent coming out of the ground, the dog wasn't going to find it. So they were simple, but super effective, I guess.
I wouldn't want to be an engineer. So, I mean, you briefly touched on what is it like because we had a couple of secos when we went over, and they obviously, when they sort of picked a route that resulted in, one of the boys getting brassed up or blown up, they took it on board as a personal sort of attack. Was there stuff that you missed that resulted in boys getting hurt? And is that something that you sort of dealt with or had to deal with, or?
Yeah, one. I made the promise after it happened that I'd never miss another thing. And fortunately, my second trip, which was with 2 Commando, which was way busier than the first, way, way, way busier. And we're talking about complex IED laying. That's with the era when they were actually lacing whole buildings with IEDs. So they'd have multiple trigger points, and they'd be putting like artillery shells in the walls and stuff like that. Like that was a way more complex threat environment, but we were lucky to evade most of those. But yeah, we were in, it was probably early 2009, and it was winter. So obviously shitty time of year to be cruising out and about the place. But, we were on this particular side of the river, and, we'd asked for overwatch on this particular choke point. There was one entry over the other side of the river, one only. And we asked for, overwatch overnight to keep an eye on this one choke point, because it was obvious as shit. If you're going to lay anything, you're going to lay it there. And we got told no. And that's not disparaging anyone. I guess it's probably easy to talk shit in hindsight, but we got told no because operationally we needed all of our ASLabs and everything up the road. So we went off, we parked up for the night, and then we were coming back through this choke point. And, we got out to search this choke point, and it was that eerie, like, early morning, dead quiet type scenario. And we're like, ooh, something's not right here. And I sent the dog down into the defile, and he was sniffing and humming around. But the way the scent picture works with an IED, right, it needs time for the actual explosive scent to come through the soil. And then before that can occur, all you're dealing with is disturbed earth. And if your dog doesn't indicate because it doesn't smell explosive. It doesn't mean he's wrong. He just hasn't smelt what he needs to smell to make him sit right. And I had my dog humming along the choke point. And I said, I'm not 100% because he has an indicator, but there's disturbed earth there. And like, if anywhere, it's going to be here. And the secco agreed with me, Joe. He was like, yeah, but we can't fuck around all day looking for this thing. So we got the boys to search with their mine detectors down into the D file. And we would have missed stepping on this thing by like, I look back on it. We were like an inch away from stepping on this IED, right? And then the car drove down to pick us up. Once we searched the shit out of it, the boys missed it with mine detectors too. It's not their fault. You're literally looking for that like pinky-sized bit of metal for the detonator. And then we got in the car, which we would have been standing literally right over the top of it the way it was laid. And we got in the car and drove off to the next checkpoint. And then the fifth car through, which was Craig's car, the sergeant from the grunt platoon we were with, they went through a little bit quick, and the arse end of the bushy, like the actual V-shaped hull, hit the PMN, the actual mine, the anti-personnel mine. So they didn't lay it in the right wheel tracks, but because they went through a little bit quick, the arse end bottomed out, and then because it hit the actual vehicle itself, it pushed all the water in the hull up through the back end, and it busted his legs up. And he was pretty banged up. He was banged up for a lot of years. He's back riding his bike and stuff now, but that particular incident, and then on top getting blown up as well, I think that just sent me into that like hyper-vigilance mode of promising myself I'd never miss anything again. And fortunately enough, I didn't. Or like where, like even if there was IDs, we managed to maneuver around them and not hit them. But it weighed on me for a lot of years. I didn't think it did because I kind of came at peace with what my actions were. And it is one of those unfortunate things, but I think it caught up with me like years down the track, thinking about how it affected Craig's life and all that sort of stuff. And it's something I've dealt with, but now I'm pretty at peace with it because I probably couldn't have done any better on the day. But if you go looking for a fight, you're bound to get punched in the nose at some point, right?
Yeah, mate. Is this something? Yeah, I mean, you were a young guy over there. You would have been how old?
22, I believe. 22. Yeah, 22 or 23.
Yeah,
nothing older than that, man.
You're 22 years old. I think most of the young Thundercats, if you're back in Australia and you're 22 years old, like, man, I was still trying to figure out what my dick did, I think, properly. Do you know what I mean? Like, and then getting over there and being put in that position where, I mean, that's a lot of stress, having those actions resulting in injuries like that. What did you see or how did you feel it perpetrate through your psyche? Like, what were the things looking back on it? You're like, oh, maybe that was because I think a lot of people that have gone through some stuff, they don't realize until post and they're like, that actually makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think I really processed it until a lot of years after, where a whole heap of personal events happened sequentially in a really short period of time of about 18 months. And I hit just rock bottom and burnout, and I sort of unpacked it all. But like the manifestation on the ground, right? Like, so particularly after we got blown up, we got flown to Kandahar for the dog to get looked at by the vet. He had a bit of internal bleeding and stuff, but he was okay. And then when I got back on the tools, every single vehicle job I went on from that point on, in the vehicle, I felt the most unsafe in any part of the operation, right? When I was out on the ground, I felt in control. Because, yeah, I missed that one IED with Craig, but at least you could be out and affecting the outcome. And when we were in the vehicle, it was just so many moving parts that you couldn't control. So like I just held on to that for like, I was just a wreck. But luckily on my second trip, we did a lot of fly in, fly out work. We didn't do a lot of vehicle jobs. But even like 2012, like we did a couple of vehicle jobs and I was still like an anxious wreck in the back of the car, like just thinking about it. Like we're driving at night too, doing a lot of night ops, and I'd just be sitting in the car wide awake, just waiting for stuff. Like it sort of just, it messed with me a fair bit I never really let up on it because we'd get out of the car and be able to get to work. But that's how it sort of manifested initially. And then that, obviously the guilt processing, like I just made sure I leveled up my skills for that second trip. I made sure I was the best operator I possibly could be on the ground. And then that resulted in my new dog having some really good finds, got the trust with the two commando boys. And then going through a few big jobs with them, like it sort of just, it looked after itself because I let my operations skills sort of do the talking and put that in the back of my mind and not let it affect me too much.
Was there any finds while you were over there? So talking like when you work with some of the two commando boys, and you found something you were like that could have been catastrophic had you not have found it. I mean, catastrophic is as much as missing a bomb, but you know that had that real life, real world effect where you're going, this could have been an absolute mass-cas, horrific.
No, because we were doing a lot of like direct target, right? So there'd be no pre-warning that we'd be coming in. We were doing a lot of stuff with the DEA, counter drug work. So we'd find out if they were processing a bunch of opium or morphine or whatever it was. And then we'd rip in on target at like 4 a.m. So they'd never have a chance to lay any IEDs for the routes in and out, which is awesome because you couldn't be targeted. There was a couple of jobs where we were in Kajaki where the IED threat was like huge. I always remember, like I was walking down this dark alley, had my night vision on, and I was with the boys, and they were my regular crew because I sort of just attached myself to the regular bunch of fellas, a bunch of shooters, and they're like, Brett, you go first down this alleyway, and the shoot threat was high. And the IED threat was high, but the IED threat was even higher, right? So they're like, Brett, you got to go first. I'm like, fuck, righto. Sent my dog away and I'm walking along and I turn around and here they are with their fingers in their ears taking the piss, like it's like just having a joke going, oh. I'm like, fuck you. It was pretty funny. We had a few jokes like that. So we steered all around a lot of it, but there were jobs where one of the boys, Trent, functioned one of those house-borne IEDs. So where the house was completely wide, but it didn't function properly. So he got pretty hurt from it, but not everyone got injured by it. So that was a pretty good outcome. Luckily, it didn't function correctly. My mate Scotty Smith, who died in back end of 2012 off the trip behind us, he was in one of those house-borns, I believe, that killed him, but he saved his whole team before he got crumped. So we dodged all of that. But like you could hear on the ICOM chatter, like when we go into a building and search it and it was desolate, like it was one of the places where they were processing the drugs, you'd hear them on the ICOM going, yeah, they're in the house with the bomb now. And we were just lucky we never stood in anything, I reckon. With the way they were laying them and how long they were building these buildings with the bombs in the walls, they were completely sealed off. They'd worked out how the dog actually detects the explosives and that sort of jazz as well. They knew how to beat a mine detector by laying pretty much all plastic. So I wouldn't be surprised if we just got really, really lucky.
Yeah, I think that happened quite a bit. You'd hear the luck of the Australians, like there was some stuff going on, and noting the amount of near misses. I've never heard of a house-born IED, but I can't believe that, mate. You know, the whole house was lined up to blow up.
Yeah, well, that's what they sort of reacted to when we started ripping in on target because they'd set us up with these, with the information too. I'm positive all the informants that we were getting info from were getting fed some of this info from the Taliban as well, where they were like, yeah, tell them we're doing this here. And they'd make it look exactly like they were, or they'd do it a few days before we'd even be able to get there, and they'd have everything prepped for us. I would not be surprised. The double-sided deals that went on in that place were crazy. But like that trip itself, every like second job we were getting brassed up, couple of near chopper crashes. I think we had a brownout coming in on target in one of those CH-53s, the big yank choppers. And I'm sitting there and I was meant to get first out the door, and that's not what was meant to happen with the dog. But I was first there, and then all of a sudden I was over the other side of the chopper on top of this guy named Dirk from the DEA like riding him into the ground. Like we just completely did a 90-degree turn. The chopper pilot saved it. I don't know how he did it. But there was whole heaps of those things, ripping in on target with RPGs flinging past you when we were down in Kijaki and Helmand province. And it's like those V-22s, the Ospreys, worst fucking airframe in the world to go direct on target. Worst. They're awesome for getting home and to and from because they're quick. But then when they have to do their little rotor thing and come down nice and slow, you just sit there with rockets going past and trace, and you're just looking at it going, this is fucking not ideal. But it was all part of it. It was all part of the fun and the enjoyment, and I've got some pretty good stories out of it, I guess.
Yeah, I would say so. So this is a big one as well. A lot of people are fans of your dogs. What was the relationship like with the dogs you had over there? Now I know it's pretty tight, but just to explain people, some pretty sick relationships you form with your dogs, hey?
Yeah, it's the best job in the world, man. You get to like kick it around a different country, different parts of the world with a dog. My first dog, because we were doing a lot of vehicle operations, we slept in the same swag together. Though he never got up and did picket with me, the prick. He always just used to steal my sleeping bag and just go for a snooze. But like my second boy, we'd be at the Camp Russell. In Camp Russell, we'd finish up for a job, right? You'd be going to bed, and then all of a sudden I'd hear this boom, boom, boom. Hey, Turls, your dog's out here. I'm like, what do you fucking mean? I put him in his kennel. And then I'd open the door and here he is wagging his tail going, I just chewed through the fence to come and see ya. So you just get these amazing bonds with the dogs. They both retired. My first boy lived to like the age of 17. He passed away a couple of years ago. And then Bullseye, my second guy, he's in Townsville as the Royal Australian Engineers mascot up there at the moment. So they get pretty good lives, man. But geez, they just make life a lot better. Because they weren't the fuzzy chainsaws that the two Commando boys and the SAS had. You could actually play with them, pat them and you weren't always worried if they were going to chew your face off. So, that's why the boys loved them, I guess.
Mate, we did a couple operations, where we had the dogs attached and we ended up adopting a couple of local dogs. We had Trackpad and we had, I can't remember what the other these mongrel dogs, and we kept them. And Chopper, the Afghan Wonder Dog, we got him washed. Vets were sending over.
I remember Chopper. Yeah,
Chopper, right? Were you MRTF too?
No, MRTF 1, man.
So we took over Chopper from.
Yeah.
Seven area at Ateek, and they're like, yep. You look after this dog and the morale that dog, he would just come on patrol, follow us. It was just something that people could take their mind off. I thought it was absolutely phenomenal, mate. And we kept Chopper. Chopper ended up having to go. I think one of the Kandaks ripped out, and they end up going to one of the other provinces, and three Mack trucks ended up getting fucking daisy chained full of a whole Kandak with the Afghan, and Chopper went with them, I think. And we adopted one, but the rank never managed to pick up the same vibe, or I don't know, the effect that a dog had on a patrol or a group of guys. I remember we had a ROC ordered one of our mongrel dogs that we adopted to get shot, like take him out and shoot him. And that probably had more of an effect on the team than any contacts or any near misses. They're like, you fucking shot our dog, you cunt. You know what I mean? Like, so, that was a rant, mate. I don't know, but,
it's a man's best friend test, mate. It's a man's best friend test, right? You put your partner, guy, girl, I'm not judging anyone for their selection in life, but you put your partner and your dog in the boot of a car in the hot sun for an hour. You open it up, there's only one that's happy to see you. No one do that, actually. That'd probably be bad drills.
So you got to keep, when they retire, you get to keep them and obviously adopt them, do you?
Yeah. So I had a chance to adopt my second fella. I just didn't have the room for him. So one of the boys, Lats, took him and still has him and loves him to death. So he's got a pretty bloody good life. And we always used to try and rehome especially the experienced dogs that had done a few trips and paid their dues with one of the handlers. And then if not, you'd be able to find one of the boys in the regiments that would take him quick smart, like they'd never really go without. But who wouldn't want a dog that's fully trained, listens to commands, and is your best friend, loves chasing a tennis ball? Like you're getting this pre-made dog that's just a weapon at life. So it's a pretty easy sell to give him another home, that's for sure.
And as a byproduct, if there's any ever IEDs in downtown Sydney, they'll find them.
Yeah, well, that's what was it? We had one of the boys actually take an old EDD home, and the story went that he was out walking him in a park somewhere, and the dog indicated, and it turns out there was like this little cased pistol or something sticking around. I don't know how true it was. I can't even remember who said it, but even the boys that had weapons at home, like in their safes and whatnot, if they loved having a shoot on the weekend, you'd often find the dogs sitting there just staring and indicating at the safe or wherever they had their rounds. And yeah, they never lose it. Like you could take them out of the army, but you'll never take the army out of the dog. That's for sure.
Mate, so what happened? What was the big move out of army, and what was the reason that you decided to sort of transition out? Was it part of service or?
I think there was a mix of things, right? Like 2012 was a busy trip. Anyone who's watched the news recently and knows what sort of how hard it was for the crews operating there, I was pretty burnt out, to be honest. There were some. I think I was also maturing as an individual. I was 25 at that stage. I joined the army at 17, so I didn't know anything different. But I'd started to get a bit wiser about the world, and I'd started to grow out of the political or cultural style of what the army was delivering for me. That's not a slight. I think I just started to outgrow it and wanted to spread my wings a little bit. But I'd also, the 2 days after I got back in country from my second trip, went in to see the SSM, and he's like, "You're going back in 6 months for," I think it would have been SOTG 19 or whatever it was. So it was going to be a quick turn and burn. But by then, I'd met my ex-wife at that stage. I wanted to sort of look at my other horizons, pretty burnt out. So I decided to exit, chuck my leave in and pop smoke there. So I think it was just a mix of a lot of things. But if we drew it down to one, I probably didn't have the heart in me to go back for another trip. I think I'd spent enough time in that country living on the edge, and I thought my heart's not in anymore, and that's where the boys get hurt or killed if I miss something. I'd run pretty good luck the whole time I'd been there, the 14 months, so I thought I'd pull up stumps while I was ahead.
So what about, sorry boys, I'm just going to jump in. I haven't been talking much. My computer's about to explode as usual, but it seems like it's good now. So what about now though? You've been out for a bit. Do you ever look at it, especially watching stuff on the news a couple of weeks ago, do you ever look at it and go,
I'd 100% go back again. Like I would. I'd love to. It's like the whole, like it's the best job I ever had. It won't be the only best job I ever have. Like I've got a pretty good mission now, but I'd go back if we reassembled the band and got the band back together. I'd go back because it was a job. Life was simple, man. Like you didn't have social media. You had a mission. You had a purpose. You had the boys. Like especially over in SOTG too, the food was bloody good. You got looked after, and you were achieving the mission. Like going out, I think we took something ridiculous like $200 million worth of street value drugs off the market in our 5.5 months there. So it fills you with a purpose, and that probably leads to why a lot of people struggle when they exit. I've just come to peace with it where instead of framing it as an excuse or a limiting belief for my life, I call it an experience which guides my growth and sort of and the way I conduct myself. So I'm very thankful for it. I would go back, but I'm also pretty bloody content with the mission I'm on now.
And what about the boys that you're over there with, or the boys that you're in with? You catch up with them a bit?
I've stayed in
still?
contact with like a core group of the boys. Like I've never really been one to mix across a huge amount of social circles. Being a doggy, everyone knew you by your dog's name, and not you. But I sort of floated around. But I've stayed in contact with a few of the boys that I went through particular parts of training with. But really, like it's you sort of drift apart from the ones that you didn't have a close connection with, but there's just that small nucleus, which they've also been super, super helpful for me getting through some tough times. Like they've been the support network I've needed. So I've kept those boys in the pocket, and they're always good to catch up with and reminisce about times of old.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I asked, because I mean, I don't know anyone that got out and didn't think about getting back in. And I've also don't know anyone who got out, then got back in and then recommends it to anyone else. Because it's like you get out and get back in. It's not the job that you miss. It's the boys that you're doing it with, and they're not there anymore. You get back in, you're just a sad old panda hanging around the cages. But yeah, it's good to know it's the same across.
I think it's a purpose-driven thing, isn't it? It's a purpose thing. Like you miss the purpose and the mateship, but you think it's the job. But it's also a super stable career if you look at it like it's a government paycheck every fortnight you can bank on. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of the boys, particularly in the last couple of years, have really pondered it seriously or done it. But you're right, everyone I've seen that's gone back in as a retread absolutely hates it.
Yeah, mate, it is. And everyone asks you, it's like, what was the stress levels like when you're overseas with the military? I'm like, you've got one thing to worry about, and that is don't blow up. That you don't have to worry about bills. You don't have to worry, well, I was going to say you don't have to worry about the missus, but a lot of the boys still do. Or your partner, whatever it might be. But yeah, there is nothing else going on in your brain other than the job in front of you. It's almost like the yogi saying, like, just to be present. That is the one time in my life I know I was ultimately present in the Middle East. Didn't care about the past, didn't care about the future, other than
it definitely makes life simple. And I talk to it actually with my clients and stuff, like simple lives like that. And that's why I'm very big on getting people to cut shit that they don't need out of their lives. When you come back into the world of like getting slammed with social media ads, different priorities, you're back in with your family, you got to do 400 things in your day. Like that's where that cognitive fatigue and the sort of struggling starts, because it's not simple anymore. You've got multiple things to consider, other people in your life that you need to worry about. And I think that's part of the struggle with most people. They just get flogged to a point where they're just tired and mentally fatigued that they're not making the best decisions, or it's a contrast so much that they wish they could go back to that simple life, but it's just simply not the case anymore.
Mate, Simple Life's a Good Life, which is the perfect segue.
Oh, the book that I wrote in 2014, it's called The Minimalism Effect. I honestly don't recommend anyone get it. It's free on Kindle now. I wrote it. It has a four-star rating, and it's had 15,000 copies sold. But I challenged myself. Yeah, I challenged myself in 2014 to write something and publish it within 6 weeks. Because I was really struggling with self-doubt and putting my own shit out there and wondering what people would think. It was the old imposter syndrome thing, right? And I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to write this book, get it out into the world and see what happens. And then it actually went all right. It hit #1 bestseller on Amazon once or maybe even twice. I can't remember exactly, but I've gotten rid of 15,000 copies of it. And all the positive feedback was awesome. And you always get those negative Nellies that go, your book's shit, your book's that. And it's not my best work. I guarantee it. Like, I guarantee you, I actually wouldn't recommend anyone get it. Wait till I rewrite it and relaunch it this year. But it was a process of actually starting to not give a fuck about the thoughts and opinions of others. And it actually did the world of good for me by getting it out there.
No, mate, I couldn't agree more. I think that especially around military crowds in the veteran community, a lot of the guys and girls that have ideas and want to have a crack, we're so, especially in the OR kind of community, you're so used to being told you're doing something shit that even if you've got what you know is a brilliant idea, a lot of people are just too scared to have a crack because they've got this imposter syndrome and they don't want to back themselves on Civvy Street having a crack. And Adam Boyd, one of the blokes, he's an engineer as well. Actually, he's doing a fair bit of project management stuff with us. One of his main mottos is in the pursuit of perfect, don't forget good. And that's something I think everyone can take away from. Like, have a crack. You're going to get haters. Like, it's 2021. If you put something out there and there's no haters, you might be living in an echo chamber. But have a crack. It might only be good, but then you can improve on it.
Yeah,
and
well, my feedback metrics of when I take someone's feedback on board is, like, particularly with writing and getting your thoughts and opinions out there. A, do you write? B, have you written a book and actually given it to the world to critique? And then C, are you someone I actually respect? And if you can answer like 1, 2, or 3 of those questions, oh, listen, I'll take it on board. Absolutely. Because I love constructive criticism. I think that's what the military sets you up well with, is receiving criticism and improving from it. But like, if you're in one of those, if you can't answer yes to one of those questions, I do not give a fuck about what you think. And learning how to just sort of not care about that sort of stuff is important, particularly like that ORs thing. You've usually got a crusty sergeant or woe that didn't do anything with themselves, that hates a lot, just used to punching durries and drinking cans of Coke for brekkie. That can sometimes be a negative Nelly. And then you get the other guys on the other side that are the good operators. They go, yeah, go for it. Have a crack. But you're going to get it. Like, social media is an amplifier for idiots, mate. Like, if you want to have an opinion and a sook about something, you've got a perfect platform to just get a bit sendy with it and go for gold.
Yeah, this is what's perplexing to me. Is it's Australians are all good blokes and a fair go and fair dinkum, and then as soon as someone's like, "Oh no, he's a politician," like, well, fuck him, and they're just, he's a published author now. No, he's a human being still. You don't have to be a piece of shit. Keep your opinion to yourself. Like, no, I've got to get it off my chest.
Yeah, it's that tall poppy syndrome, mate. I think we're bad for it in Australia. You talk to American counterparts and they're like, "That's awesome, man." Like, they're pretty encouraging. I don't know where we get it from, to be honest. Like, it's 2021. If you want to go and make something yourself or have a red hot crack at something, whether it's a business or bringing something into the world that can benefit others, like, it's perfect. The world is perfect for you to be able to do that now. You can reach the audience you want to reach. You can find the crowd that loves what you do. And honestly, if you spend your time, if you've got the time to be the one that comments on social media, like bagging people out, it's just coming from a deep sense of insecurity of yourself and where you're at, to be honest. Look at what COVID's done, I guess, like everyone getting up in arms about whether or not they're getting vaxxed or whatever. That's only because you feel like you are having your rights taken away as a human being. And you're feeling unsafe and uncertain. If people were just honest about it, it'd probably make for a way tamer conversation. But probably hence why I don't kill it on social media, because I'm pretty bloody boring with it. Like, worry about your own wheelhouse before you go telling other people how to deal with their own, right?
Yeah, mate, that is the problem, that social media has given a voice to people who definitely shouldn't have a voice at the moment. And the big problem, like human psychology, is we all want to be on an even playing field. And when we're on level with a peer and then they do something exceptional, write a book, for example, you've got 2 options. You can lift your own game to come up to them, or you can try and cut their legs out and shit all over them and try and bring them back down to you. And unfortunately, it's far easier to go on social media and try and shit on people than it is to actually put in the effort to go and write your own book. So the majority of the population are taking option A option B and trying to cut everyone else down.
It's the principle of effort in, isn't it? It's like health, fitness, your mindset, getting out of a rut, whatever it is, building a business. You boys would know, you're dealing with it every day. It just gets to the point where you've either got to want it enough to give it a crack, or you're just not invested in it, or it's just not the right goal or purpose for you, which is okay too. You don't have to have like really huge ambitious goals, but then you got to be careful. Like, giving shit to someone that's given it a red hot crack, you don't know what sort of, how much they're struggling. Like burnout in the PT industry, for instance, is rife. Like you get people that just bag other people out about how shit they are or why they're doing something wrong. You don't know what sort of mental state someone else is in. It's probably just better to shut your mouth and go about your business. It gives you back your time. And you've only got a certain amount of fucks to dish out, right? If you've only got a certain amount, you probably just don't want to be giving them to people that are never going to impact your life or help you on your own cause either.
Yeah, we've got Jess, chick that manages sort of our community outward focus stuff. She's a really nice chick. She's not a veteran. She's as far left and different, like chalk and cheese, and sweetest girl. And she said this thing the other day. Like we woke up, we had some comments on Facebook going pretty negative, and she's just like, to look at that sort of toxic environment that affects someone who's not even in the veteran space. So this is talking about the veteran community, and then people wanting to come forward and help. So Jess coming and helping Swiss 8, and then the amount of abuse that she copped from six people. She's like, it perplexes me, mate. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm actually a big fan. I know cancel culture is a thing, but I'm actually a big fan of telling people to fuck off. Like, I've had people sort of question or like bring up an argument towards me about things, but it's just like out of emotion. I'm like, all right, well, present what you think is the right way or whatever, and they don't have any substance. Then I'm pretty quick to just tell people to fuck off, honestly. Like if you've got genuine evidence or you've got a theory that's pretty valid or you want to present it as a counter argument, absolutely bring it along. Let's talk about it. But also, if we get to a point where we can't agree, I am quite happy to disagree with you and move on with my life, but not tear you down to make myself leave the better feeling like the better person or bigger person. I'm like, well, that's your opinion. Sweet. I'm gonna go do me now. I'll see you later. I think that's what we've lost to in this day and age is the ability to agree to disagree and just move on with our lives. I think we hold grudges that don't matter for far too long and get caught up with them if we're not careful.
Yeah, but it's also holding grudges is one thing. I mean, that's something you need to kind of evolve out of your own ego and stuff. And some people, it's just never going to happen. I mean, me and Max have discussed this before. Like, I'm a believer in the fact that humans have evolved to require conflict. We've just been in conflict forever, and we're not at a point yet where our lives are comfortable and easy at the moment. And if you don't believe so, I think you probably need a good hard look at the Western world. But we haven't been in this state for long enough to have evolved out of that need for conflict. And people who are stressing themselves deliberately by training hard every day or fasting or cold baths or whatever it is, somewhere in your life you've got deliberate and controlled stress that you're getting that kind of internal conflict out, that kind of settles it a bit. And then the people that don't are sitting at home going, I've got this need to just pick a fight with someone for some reason. I'm not going to go out and start swinging. I'm going straight to Facebook and hitting the keyboard. And then I think most of them are doing it subconsciously, but I mean, I think, not trying to be all righteous, but as a mental health organisation, we've got someone like Jess, almost qualified as a psych, understands what's going through people's heads, still gets brought down, like spends a weekend watching these old dudes, and they're all in their 60s, 70s, trolling, brings her down. And I just look at it and go, I would love to jump on and go, fuck off and delete him. But at the same time, we've got to look at it and go, I have to put myself in that person's shoes for a minute before we just tell them to fuck off. And chances are that's a pretty miserable person on the other end of that keyboard. They're not happy in life. And
yeah, and that's like when I was saying like my decision tree of listening to what their comments points are. You find out whether they actually are reaching out and they just don't know how to articulate they're in pain. And you dig into it. And if they're happy to engage, you can pull it out of them usually. But if they just have an event, I tell them just to rack off, because it's just, they don't want to have their mind changed. They are just acting out because they feel insecure or they're struggling or whatever. But I have numerous people that come in, float into my DMs asking me about stuff all the time. And for no charge, no nothing, I'll talk to them and actually like see if I can help or show them resources or point them to someone who can, because that's what you do. So once you get to that point where you realize, is this person just bad at articulating that they're in trouble or they're struggling because they're obviously in that headspace? Can I help? Yes, no. If no, try and point them somewhere else. But if they're just trying to pick a fight, just tell them to piss off. And that's probably why I probably never become a psych or go down that medical path, because I think I've got empathy for the amount people struggle, because I've been through some pretty significant stuff over the last decade or so, including military service and the stuff that comes with that. But I also want to be able to have those frank conversations with people. Some of my best conversations with my clients have been ones where I've gone, you need to stop complaining and just get back to work to the plan we set. And by like doing that, it sometimes shocks people back into action and gets moving, but also it's just such a complex thing, the brain. And social media doesn't do it any good, I guess, but I think it's trying to be as polite as you can, but then some people just don't want to be helped, like those 60-year-olds that try and tear Jess down. Like, they don't want to be helped. They're past that point. They just want to have a rant. They're the guys that you probably need to tell to fuck off. You probably can't because you're a mental health charity. I'm lucky I'm just a small business that can do what I want. But obviously if I end up turning into a serious business, I'm going to have to curb this attitude, aren't I? And learn how to master it, or probably just take myself off customer-facing roles. But it's just that point. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I guess. Like, if people are feeling unsafe, whether it's physiologically, psychologically, whatever, they'll act out in what they've been taught to act out in through their upbringing or their transformational years as an adult. So if they've been taught to be aggressive, they'll be aggressive. But if they've been taught to be passive aggressive, they'll get on social media because it's easy to do those types of things. And they're just reverting to first learnt behavior. I know exactly what they're doing. But you do, if you're struggling as a business owner or someone else as well, you have the right to tell someone to piss off. If they're not being constructive and actually helping you, or you're letting you help them, you can. A bad review, particularly the way you can actually actively be transparent on people's reviews and comments. Like, I wouldn't ever be afraid of a negative review if you actually feel like the person's trying to legitimately make you feel shit or tear you down. That's for sure.
Yeah, I don't think the Google review system gets much attention anymore, unfortunately, because everyone just knows that is the breeding ground for trolls.
You talk about, and I want to get into this experience that you've gained from your own lived experience and now leading into your business. Talk about a making point, and will this be an experience or an excuse? Can you take us through that and some of these? You've come from a place of lived experience, and what's your purpose and mission now, mate?
Yeah, so the making point, there's been a couple, to be honest. Anyone that goes through significant trauma or events, you get faced with a fork in the road, where how I describe it, like I sort of led on to earlier. You've got a decision where you can make it an excuse, where it guides your limiting beliefs and pushes you down that path of being labelled as a certain type of person for the rest of your life. Or you've got a position where you can make it an experience and do the things like what you guys are doing and what I'm doing, and actually trying to help better the world. Or just even worrying about your own wheelhouse, like I've said it earlier, worrying about that and just being a better person yourself, and not letting these time and events that are now in the past control everything to do with your future. And the first probably real big point was when I was severely burnt out running my gym, being a sole business operator, ran out of steam, had to let two of my staff go. One wasn't performing. One, he wasn't the right fit for the business, unfortunately. and then I'd burnt myself out, and I had this chance to close my gym. And in that time where I was burnt out, so 2 deployments of Afghanistan, lost 3 of the boys over there that I was good friends with. But then when I got out of the military, I lost my dad in 2014. The year after, I lost my daughter at birth. That same week, I lost a good mate. He got stabbed to death by a paranoid schizophrenic the morning after I lost my daughter. And anyone who's lost a child at birth, it was like a 56-hour labour, and she passed away just after she was born. It was fucking traumatic. And then later in that week, I lost my pop to cancer. So all of that happened within 12 months, essentially. So my dad, and then 12 months later, those 3. And then after that, a year later or 13 months later, I had my son, who was healthy and that sort of stuff. Actually, no, he had some complications just after birth as well. But I hit this point where I just had to stop and just shut everything up. I nuked my social media accounts. I disappeared. And I just had to sort of go on my different career paths where I sort of meandered through recruitment and then tech. And I pulled myself out of it slowly there. But stopping and getting to the point where I then started to choose to rebuild my life was a turning point. And then the following one came not too long after all of that, to be honest, about 2017. My marriage fell apart. And this isn't disparaging my ex-wife at all. After all those traumatic events, you could probably see why communication was lost and we sort of drifted apart. And she left me via a text message 3 days before my birthday, and took my son and went and moved in with the parents, which she had every right to. I'm not bashing her at all. We both needed to recover and heal from what we went through. And she actually caused the biggest growth trajectory of my life. So I look at it as a very positive thing nowadays. But I was laying there like in bed, like not sleeping, not like functioning essentially. And I just like, I think it was just after probably one of the only angry phone calls I've ever made to her after it. And I sort of just went, all right, that's it. Now it's time to get on with life. And then I subsequently spent a couple of years just putting the building blocks of my life back together, and hence why I stumbled into the program I built and everything like that, just searching for these answers myself and talking to people on the same journey and things like that. But those were like essentially making points where I was faced with a decision where I could be just this crippled, grumpy, well, I'm still pretty grumpy, I guess. I've said a lot of fucks in this podcast episode, I guess, but I had those points. I had the choice. And I made my choice and went the hard route, put myself into some deep, dark holes and dealt with a few of the demons that I was faced with. And fortunately enough, after some perseverance and having a good support network, I came out the other side.
That sounds like a rough 4 years of it, mate.
Yeah, well, it's people go through worse though, don't they? I'm very quick to remind myself that like everyone's got their own story. And the big thing I tell people, the physiological and psychological effects of stress and trauma, regardless if you got blown up and shot at or whatever, are the same. They manifest in the same ways. So we're all normal. So it sort of normalizes a discussion a little bit and makes it okay. So people, when I tell them my story, some people are like, whoa, and really taken aback. But I normalize it by saying the way you feel when you're burnt out and tired is exactly how I felt. And it sort of levels the playing field a little bit. But it just gets to a point we all get faced with them. Some days you just got to suck it up and get through, and then you hit the fork in the road, and whichever you choose is up to you, essentially.
How do you
I've got a good relationship with my ex-wife, yeah. We talk pretty amicably. We got shared custody of my son. My son has a great relationship with both of us. And I've got a great partner as well, who's awesome. She's integrated perfectly with our little family on my side of the thing. So, and that took a lot of work. Like you see a lot of military or veteran separations, they get pretty messy or can do. But I was going through I actually went and saw a psychologist after my ex-wife left, because I was rock bottom, and I thought, well, let's give this a red hot crack. And the most profound lesson I got taught by her was, she said to me one day, because I was really struggling with letting some of this go, and she said, Brett, what you've been through makes sense, but not everything has to be a battle. And it kind of just smacked me in the face. I was taking this like hard attitude towards everything where I had to just kick doors in and kick ass and take names, I guess. Like I was just going through that military sort of mindset, and it really taught me to stop. And then I dug into a whole heap of things like Stoic philosophy and things like that, which really helped. That pivoted my attitudes and my approaches to things. And I'm not perfect. I get angry, and there's probably people that listen to this podcast that know me and probably want to say you're full of shit. But I probably made a choice in those transformational points to be happy to be wrong and make mistakes, and then just never stop, and never stop improving. So I think that's probably the only reason why I've sort of kept on the trajectory I have, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I mean that story resonates, mate. I haven't reached that point with my ex yet. We go off on being really good mates and then hating each other again. And what you were just saying, the big takeaway for me is the only way to solve that stuff is to look inwards and solve your own shit. Because you're sitting at the table with an ex-missus. So I got 2 kids as well, and sitting down with her and trying to solve everything by telling her where she went wrong is not going to fix anything. The only way to move forward is to look inside yourself and go, where are my shortfalls and what can I fix in my life? And then, I mean, I get that all the time too. Like I think everyone should be evolving and changing every year of their life. And I know there's a lot of, when I talk about some of this stuff and say how you need to reflect on X, Y, Z, and people are like, you are full of shit. I'm like, what stage of my life are you judging me on? Because if you're looking at me, the 24-year-old when I was in the army, 100% arrogant as fuck. And I'm not saying I've completely solved that problem, but I'm aware of it, and there's work in progress. But yeah, mate, obviously your story's a solid one, and it's obviously would have been hard to get through, but it sounds like you did push through with and turn it into a positive, or at least learn and grow from it by introspection.
We can only control what's inside ourselves and our own actions, I guess. But I think probably one of the things that really put it in perspective for myself to drive to be sort of a more consistent individual to growth was like losing a daughter and then having this son that I hold most dearly, right? Like parenting's by far the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Being present, not choosing not to get the shits at things when you're used to just getting things done yourself and efficiently, helping a young person grow. Like I had that perspective to sort of say, I'm sort of facing this tipping point now where I could have a really shitty relationship with my son, or I could just worry about what I'm doing and lead by example and then have this relationship with my son, which I had a great relationship with my dad. And I just made that choice to make it about him as opposed to me, which I've got a pretty big ego, man. I've done a lot of cool things in my life and I'm proud of a lot of those things too. But I've also had a lot of fuck ups and errors and had a lot of things go wrong too, which has probably grounded me to a point where I was able to gain that perspective, which I'm very thankful for.
So, I mean, this is going to take us into where you're at now and what you've got coming up. I mean, I know you spoke about you're rewriting your book and your business and your life values, the 3 Bs, mate.
Yeah, I've had these. I published them in my original book. I really struggled finding purpose and alignment when I left the military, right? Like I jumped into fitness and I'm lucky I just had a stupid work ethic that I developed from 2 deployments to get me through. And everyone's got the requisite aptitude to be good at business. It's just a hard slog because you get all the doubters, all the haters, and like usually you either run out of cash flow or you burn yourself out, which I did my first evolution, I guess. But the 3 Bs that I run with, I think value-based decision making is really important for people. It guides the ship. It's the rudder to where you point your efforts and time. But my 3 Bs are be grateful, because life can get pretty shit. So you better be grateful with what you have. And being grateful for what you have now starts to remove some of that wanting in that I need more type attitude. And then the second one's be useful. Because let's be honest, most people aren't. A lot of people are just existing. And that's not a slight at people. You might be if anyone's listening to this and you're finding yourself in a place where you simply are just existing, there is a whole nother world when you find the purpose that you want to chase that is going to light up your life. Whatever it is, it even just can be being a good parent, being a good partner, whatever it is, it can be small. But if you don't have that purpose, go and bloody look for it and be useful and be in service of others. If you've got your mind and your life in enough order that you can be of service to others, go and be useful. Go and do something of use to whether it's your immediate circle or the benefit of a population. You will be surprised how it changes your life. And then the final one, which is probably the key case in point that gets me through most things because I just slap myself up the side of the head when I have these days, is be consistent. If we look at like sort of the way we're marketed to on social media and the day it's a very much instant gratification world we live in, and being consistent is what sets everyone who is successful out from anyone who isn't in their pursuits. And then if you get your goal right and your purpose and you align it with a strong value set, I think you're going to be pretty right. You're going to run into speed bumps and hurdles, particularly the bigger and more audacious your goal is, the harder it's going to be to get there and the more growth it's going to demand from you. But you've got the North Star and you'll be able to persevere through those tougher times.
Sound advice, mate. And as long as people just need to, like you were saying, they've got to be aware that it's not going to be easy and they've just got to chip away at it over time. There is no such thing as an overnight success for anyone out there listening. I mean, there's plenty of memes kicking around. An overnight success is 10 years in the making.
It's what we get marketed to. There's those ultra successful people, but they're the ones that have slugged it out. And that's like I say it. I've probably said it on a couple of occasions now. Where we go wrong as a cohort of ex-military types, particularly in fitness, is we preach discipline, right? Discipline is only formed over years of consistency. I say to people, you need to take action. Then you need to gain some momentum. That will then form into consistency, which after time will form into discipline. So we got to stop telling people you need to be more disciplined. We got to start telling people to just take that small jump. Just aim for consistency over the long term. But before you step off on it, make sure it's the right thing you want to do. Don't base it on someone marketing to you, getting you all excited, and then all of a sudden you wonder why 2 weeks after you burn out and you're not interested in it anymore. That's just, it's not planning or choosing values in alignment with your goals or your values. I think that's where we go wrong as a cohort because we got discipline flogged into us at Kapuka, at bloody IETs, through special operations, through your operation, like any operations you did, like we got it beat into us. And when we weren't disciplined, people died. People got seriously hurt. So we had that reinforced time and time again. But I guess we know how many of the guys that we sort of stay in contact with have lost all of their fitness, that like aren't really disciplined anymore too. It's a lifelong process. It's hard to master.
Yeah, you see some of the we did a couple of when I was on a couple of promotion courses, and there was this I don't know, the wingy came in to have a bit of a spiel on discipline and what discipline meant. And he, the example he used was shaving every day. And this Sascat got up. He was on course and he's like, I completely disagree. Shaving every day. He goes, how long does it take you to shave every day? And his warrant officer was like, about 2 minutes. And he's like, so that's discipline, is it? He goes, well, I think discipline is an unshaved guy that puts hours and hours and hours of work into running his gun and perfecting this, and he said, that's discipline, is this razor focus constantly, and this dude just sat there, was like, they couldn't get the rhetoric out of his head, mate. He's like, no, but you have to shave. That's discipline. Like, no, that's your monkeys in a cage version of what discipline is, mate.
That was always the reaction from every crusty woe when you'd pop over from Camp Russell with long hair, half a beard. Like you'd roll over and they'd just be like, you need to shave. You're like, I'm over there. They're like, damn it. And they just walk off. Like it's just a control metric, right? Like if you're talking about controlling the masses, yeah, you look for little things like that and how to influence people on a micro level like that. Like they're the only ways you can do it. But like having the operators on junior leaders course and that, I got to do my course with, Mark Donaldson. He was in my section as well, actually. And he was just a wealth of knowledge. But you can see he went through, if you've read his book, he went through some really significant events as a child and which galvanized him for his life. So he had those turning points too. But he was a really cool dude. He was in my section. I also got student emeritus. I beat him, just if he ever listens to this. Probably the only thing I'd ever be better than him.
Mate, I'll clip that out and send it to him. See how we go.
Yeah, just general soldiering. Yeah, cool. He's just one of VC, no big deal. No, but he was such an inspirational dude to be around. Like, to be honest, like those guys and the way they're trained and bred and all that. I'm lucky I grew up with a few guys that went over to Perth and that sort of stuff. Like those guys were really, really influential on the way I elevated my level of discipline. Once I actually learned what real discipline was, that was actually one of the very similar turning points when I started to work with them. It was an eye-opener for sure. It was a very humbling experience. But those sort of guys, they know what discipline is. But quite often, like, look what they go through to become disciplined too. It's proof of what I just said. It takes years and certain events to make you that way.
Mate, so that people listening, where can they find, what have you got going on over the next 6 months? Where can they find your programs? Where can they follow you? And where can they get more? I'm going to have to go back and re-listen to this podcast as well.
Well, the best place to grab me is on my website, minimalismfitness.com. It's got all the links to my socials, Instagram, Facebook. All my content is free on YouTube. Always will be. And I know we're talking about getting some of my programs into the Swiss 8 app, which I'm going to do for sure. More than happy to get those in there for you. So particularly what I specialize in, so you can actually know if you're going to waste your time or not. Obviously habit shaping and stuff, I have like my own process with that, but more so mobility, movement and getting people back to activity. So if you got busted injuries from service or just getting a bit older, that's sort of my wheelhouse. So I'll set up a page for you guys. It'll just be minimalismfitness.com/Swiss8. I'll send you the link for the show notes. You'll be able to get access to all of my content because it is 100% free. And then we'll look to put something in the Swiss 8 app in the coming months so you guys can really get stuck into it. But then following that, next year I'm off to build something through a startup incubator. Who knows what it is and how it's going to turn out, but hopefully we can help and scale people to a massive effect. I'd like to help 1 million people within the next 5 years with all of this stuff. So I'm on the journey. We'll see how we go.
Mate, that was actually one of the things I was going to bring up, but we might wait 6-12 months, get you back on and talk about what it's like going through that startup incubator, because I think that's a whole new story. And we've talked about life in the military and growth after, but it'd be good to talk about how you completely reshaped into a soon to be highly successful tech startup.
And I'll be homeless. Yeah.
That's a bloody story too, mate.
Yeah, hopefully just hook us up with a coffee and a feed then, boys. But like that, but I'm willing to put it all on the line. So we'll see within the next 6 months, first 6 months of next year, whether this thing will take off. First 3 will give me an idea if I'm on the right track, and then have something hopefully in existence. But it is proof. Like, I'm no one special. I was a middle of the road white kid from Brisbane, man. Like, I passed all my aptitude and assessments to become an Air Force pilot. And because I was a lazy prick at school, because I didn't understand the value of work ethic as a young person, academically, I mean, I got told I had to go to uni for a year and then I'd get accepted back into the program. And then I chose to go down the dog side because I learned they had dogs in the army. But the face on the Air Force recruiter was the funniest thing I've ever seen in all my life. I've literally passed through all the gates. I had to just go to uni for a year and he's looking at me going, "Are you sure you want to do this?" So
I want to be a what? No, they got dogs, mate.
yeah, so it's just proof. Like, if there's anyone listening to it that's thinking about starting their own things, obviously follow you guys. You guys are doing great things. I'm just an average, middle of the road kid from Brisbane that just went through a couple of tricky patches in my 20s that managed to get through okay. Like, it's not impossible. Tech isn't confusing. Look at the boys at like companies like With You With Me now and stuff like that. a lot of veterans doing great things in a lot of spaces. The world's your oysters, boys and girls. Don't let some self-limiting beliefs, some crusty woe in the military gave you, hold you back. Go for it.
Mate, it should be the opposite. I mean, me and Mex are the same. I was an infantry section commander. Mex was an infantry sergeant. Now explaining tech to current serving warrant officers, RSMs, whatever, mate, we're far more advanced. And that's not saying that's a big thing on our end. It's saying that anyone can get out, reskill, retrain, and you can forget that imposter syndrome stuff. You are bringing back to the table with politicians, generals, whatever. You're bringing back new knowledge that they know nothing about.
Yeah.
And it's
our self-limiting beliefs or fear of failure or fear of being found out as an imposter. That's usually all it drills down to. But if you've got the goal and you've got the desire, there's a lot of steps in between finding whether your idea is valid and things like that by testing and all that sort of cool stuff. But it doesn't stop you. You can start a business. I started this business that I'm running right now from $1,500, my tax return, half of my tax return last year, and it's helped over 1,000 people so far. So you don't need a lot of money. You just need a bit of guts and a brain in your head and a half decent idea, which you can bounce off boys like yourselves, myself, and then just go for it and see where you land up.
Mate, thanks for coming on the show.
Love it.
We're going to get this edited out and it'll be airing on Monday, mate. I really appreciate you coming in and guys can look at your lived experience and what you went through and follow your journey. And yeah, mate, really appreciate you taking the time and coming on.
No problems at all, fellas. I hope it helps someone, but I appreciate the time. That's for sure.
Mate, we'll chat to you later. Cheers, mate.
Thanks, fellas.